When most people think of artificial intelligence, they probably think of something like ChatGPT. You use natural language to prompt the AI and it will generate a response. If I ask it to write an essay about the causes of the American Civil War, it'll produce the essay based on whatever information it has been trained on. We can then give feedback and get a new response. We call this type of tool a chatbot because it allows you to have an ongoing conversation with the AI system. And as you've undoubtedly noticed, this kind of generative AI response is often built right into our internet searches. Since a chatbot can write an essay, it's probably not surprising that it can also write code. For example, I'll prompt it to write a Python program that asks for an employee's wage and the number of hours they worked, and then calculate their pay. The chatbot will produce code that theoretically accomplishes the task I asked for. In fact, in this case, the chatbot has given me two options for code that will solve this problem. But that's just one way AI can assist with coding. Another common use is to give the chatbot code you've already written, but that isn't working correctly. Here, I have some code I've developed to calculate some prices for groceries, but it has an error. I'll tell the chatbot I'm having trouble with my code and ask it for help, and then I'll paste my code into the prompt. One of the first things you learn in programming is that your code almost never works the first time you run it. The process of testing and fixing your code is called debugging, and AI can be a helpful way to assist with that process. If I tell it I have an error and then give it my code, it'll do its best to identify those errors. One last use that beginners might think of with coding is to ask the chatbot to explain how a piece of code works. Here, I'll tell the chatbot that I don't understand some of this code, and then I'll paste that code in. ChatGPT will take a look at it and try to explain how it works. Or I might just ask for an explanation of a general concept without providing any code. Getting help with code I wrote or getting general explanation feels a lot like tutoring or asking your instructor for help. The chatbot doesn't have office hours and doesn't make me wait for an email response to my questions. It's there with immediate answers whenever I need help. Experienced coders use chatbot tools for a lot of other stuff too. For example, I could give it some code and ask it to make that code more efficient or make it easier to understand. We call that refactoring. Or I could ask it to translate code I've written in one programming language into a different programming language, which we call transpiling. Of course, using a chatbot involves writing prompts and engaging in conversation with the AI, which means we have to make a conscious effort to use it. But there are other AI tools that are built into the editors we use to write our code, and it can be difficult for beginners to understand when they're using AI assistance and when they're not. You're familiar with the idea of autocomplete in your phone, where you start typing and it suggests how to complete the word or phrase. Many code editors have a similar feature, but it does more than just auto-completing a word or two. It can suggest entire lines of code or even small programs based on what you're typing. Here's an example using a popular code editor called Visual Studio Code and the Python programming language. As I start typing code, the AI system is analyzing what I'm writing and anything I've already written in this file to suggest how to complete the code I'm working on. It's recognized that I'm dealing with a name and I'm asking for input, so it suggests the rest of the lines of code to accomplish that task. All I have to do is hit the Tab key and it accepts the suggestion and moves on to the next line of code. And it's already suggesting what might come next. It looks like in this particular example, the AI is actually even looking at my file name and predicting what I'm working on. If I just keep hitting Tab, the AI tool will just keep writing lines of code, and since it doesn't know exactly what I'm trying to accomplish, it might have nothing to do with my actual goals or intentions. Here's the part I care about as a teacher. If I accept the suggestions, I'm skipping the process of thinking through the code myself and learning the correct way to write it. And just as importantly, learning why we need that particular line of code in that spot. I might be creating a program by doing this, but I'm probably not learning a lot from the experience. And it's important to think about how this can snowball. If I let AI complete my assignment this week, I'm in big trouble next week. I'll be trying to use the next programming skills, but I haven't actually learned the skills leading up to it. And now it's going to be even more tempting to just keep hitting tab and let AI do the work. Eventually, you're addicted to AI and you're too far behind to catch up, so you don't feel like you have any choice but to keep using it. Of course, in the hands of an experienced coder, this kind of AI-assisted completion can be a huge time saver. And for that reason, this feature is often turned on by default when you install your code editor. If a beginner doesn't understand what's happening and leaves the completion feature on, it's really easy to go from thinking about the code you're writing to just accepting suggestions and letting AI do the work. Hey, there's a little bit of dimmed out code here that looks pretty much like I want, so I'm just going to hit tab. You probably didn't go out of your way to turn that feature on, and you might not even really think of it as cheating or plagiarism. You're just using the feature in the editor. It's showing me some dimmed out code that looks like it might be good, so I'm just accepting that suggestion. And when we start thinking about that completion feature, things can get really murky. I've now disabled all the AI features in VS Code, and I'll start typing that same line of code. I'm still getting autocomplete suggestions, but it's more like on your phone. The editor is suggesting a word or two rather than entire lines or sections of code. This kind of autocompletion was around way before AI-assisted stuff was added, and many teachers see this kind of assistance as perfectly fine. But they may see AI-assisted completion as cheating. So how do we decide where to draw the line when we're making ethical decisions about AI use in coding? The same kinds of questions are coming up in other areas of our lives. If AI can generate realistic deepfake videos, is that okay if it's clearly meant as a joke? What about when it's used to mislead people about facts or events? If AI can generate actors or artwork or music, who owns that work? And is it real art in the same way that something created by a person is real art? Reasonable people can disagree about where the lines are in many of these situations. For many of us, the recent explosion of AI tools is the first time we've had to think about questions like these. Some situations feel clear and obvious, but a lot of them sit in those gray areas where what's okay isn't always obvious, and in fact where okay might not be the same for everyone. The ethics of artificial intelligence aren't theoretical anymore. We're using AI every day, sometimes without even realizing it. We need to be thoughtful about what AI use is ethical and what AI use feels like it crosses a line. As beginning programmers, that needs to start with a thoughtful approach to AI-assisted coding.